in that process of not only getting sober off the drugs, but also dealing with my trauma, it felt like this weight, this cloud had lifted off me. And I was finally able to express joy, I think, for the first time in my young life. I was 23 years old at that time, getting out of prison. And I was also spending a lot of time at the library looking for jobs because I said I was having trouble getting a job now that I had a felony. And in that process of letting go of the drugs and letting go of my depression, I also rediscovered my intelligence and that I'm a curious person and I like to learn and understand the world. And so that was really the beginning of me starting to question the world around me. I started by investigating the history of the drug war in America and learning the true origins of that. And I've come to believe it impacted a lot of my beliefs. I'll just say that. And that was the beginning of me starting to look around and say, if this was not what I was taught in school or a traditional education system, then what else is about the world was I not taught? And that was the beginning of my activism and in a couple of years later, my journalism and everything. But it all really started with that, with me going through some really traumatic experiences and then going to prison and deciding to turn my life around. And so next November 2025 will be 20 years since I got arrested. And I've been on this activism journalism path now for about 14 years. I don't have anybody in my family who is an activist or a journalist or really is on this path. Unfortunately, my father, he never recovered from his drug addiction. He died of a drug overdose a couple years ago. I didn't have very many. Of course, my mother has always been in my life and she's done her best to be there. But I do credit my grandmothers for being a big source of both my grandmothers for being a big spiritual influence, as well as both my grandmas are very awake in their own ways, spiritually, politically, etc. When they saw that I was starting to go through my own experience, both of them were very encouraging and told me to just keep going. And in fact, it was my other grandmother who is in her late 80s now, and she has a farm here in the United States, and she's grown up on farms. She's the other big influence for me in terms of why I'm focused on growing food, permaculture, building community. That's actually more of my influence than any sort of historical movements, is just having somebody else in my family who I grew up, my grandmother sending us boxes of canned goods that she was growing on her farm and then taking them to the kitchen and putting them in jars and doing that whole process. So I've been lucky enough to have some influences spiritually and in terms of true sustainability and self-sufficiency. But as far as my recovery from drugs and getting into activism, it was just, I think this is what I'm supposed to be here for.